All right, we're live and we're back with no more technical difficulties because Optimum is not great. So let's just leave it at that. But today I'm here with two of my friends, Deanna Nuñez and Christian Gonzalez, two people I really admire, not only because of their work, but because of all the mental health advocacy they do through their work. So I was going to read bios, but I think I'm going to skip it because I read it before, so anyone that's tuning in definitely saw it. Bios are also in the description of this video below if you are curious about their bios. But let's get started. How are you guys holding up? How's everyone doing, throughout this time?
We're doing pretty good. I'm out here on the West Coast in Los Angeles, so just kind of like dealing with the whole stay-at-home thing being extended now towards the end of July, and trying to stay busy, proactive during this quarantine era.
Yeah. Deanna,
for me, I'm here in Brooklyn, and I don't know. I have my days. I think everybody has their days, and I've definitely had mine. For the most part, I've just been diving into exploring new mediums. I've been painting a lot more. Like, I've dedicated a lot more time to painting while I have a break from client work. So I just kind of been being like more exploratory, more honed in into like artistic practices that I haven't had the chance to do before. So it's kind of like a whirlwind of everything right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like definitely a quite of an adjustment for everyone, I think, just kind of getting settled into what is our reality right now and not knowing what it might be tomorrow or the day after, a couple weeks from now. But let's get into I guess the topic of this sesh is called emotional expression, creative expression for mental health. So how do you, how do you creatively express your mental health through your work is the theme of today's sesh. And I guess first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about where it all began and where it all started. I think that's important to give some context. So who wants to go first in sharing, the whole little blurb about where you're from, how you got to where you are, all that kind of fun stuff?
I can go first, or Deanna, you want to go?
Yeah, remember the system? We set up a system. You go, I go.
All
right,
no,
you go. No, you go.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, I was born and raised in Colombia, Bogota. I moved to the States when I was 9. I've always been a huge fan of like 80s cartoons, anime, the whole thing growing up. I've always been attracted to color. So whenever I had the opportunity to do something creatively for the first time, which was a photography zine for Jeff Staple. Remember in Agenda?
Yeah. Love that.
I kind of fell in love with the whole aspect of layout design. And then from there, just snowballed from that to type treatment, to doodles, to color palettes. And I kind of just realized that all of that kind of just was cohesive with how my moods were. So that's why I kind of take the approach that I do. I feel like there's not a specific template for it, and I just go based off of feel. So that's how I kind of ended up creating to create.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You're currently based in LA, so
yeah,
that was a pretty recent move, about a little over a year ago. Right? More than a year ago?
I've been traveling back and forth to LA for a year, and it was a year. It started last year.
Okay.
But I moved here full time starting December.
Okay. And how's that?
Yeah.
How's just getting?
It was it was bound to happen. It was between Los Angeles or New York, and there was something about just the vibe of the whole West Coast area that was very more chill, not so fast paced, that I really enjoyed. And majority of the clients that I was getting at the time that I have now are based out of here, so it just made more sense to come here, build those networks, get new networks going, and also just like learn about the whole behind the scenes on the production side of things, from like screen printing to chain stitching and through, the whole 9 yards. So
Yeah.
LA was the move that ended up being more beneficial for me.
Yeah. Deanna, what about you? Born and raised in Miami?
So I was born in Miami, and then I was raised between Miami, Puerto Rico, and then Lakeland, which is Central Florida. And my background used to be in fashion show production. And I was, flying back and forth between Florida and New York all the time, doing production work for a really amazing designer. And one day, I had a really good friend just kind of tell me that, I don't think you're utilizing your skill set to the best potential. And it just kind of made me rethink my whole approach to what I was doing, because I love fashion. I love the whole essence of storytelling. But to know that someone so close to me saw something differently and seeing that I wasn't utilizing that to the best potential kind of just made me rethink everything. So then I started kind of dabbling into illustration and graphic design to kind of understand what that world was all about. And that's how I came across like different illustrators. I dived into what they were all about, their aesthetic, their storytelling. And it made me realize that through art, I can still obtain the essence of storytelling, but it's in a whole different medium. And it allowed me to be able to speak anything and everything that I wanted without having to say anything. And that's when I kind of took more interest into art. Mind you, I grew up in a very creative household. All my siblings, two of my siblings, they're amazing artists. So I always had that influence from the start. I just didn't take it seriously until it was time to pivot from one end of the industry to the next. That's when I started to understand that art was more so the language that I wanted to speak moving forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. And whoever that person was that told you that must be someone you really respect, because you both know we have so many people in our lives, like as creatives, who love to just give you their opinions on what you should be doing.
Yeah.
But sometimes we listen to those people, sometimes we don't.
Yeah, it was at that point, it became like a pattern in my life. Every time someone made a suggestion of like, hey, you could be doing, and not should, you could be doing X, Y, and Z. That's when it made me think about every step of my career so far. So every time someone that I respect comes into my life and they're like, hey, I think you're not, X, Y, and Z, it really makes me take a step back and see the bigger picture differently. And so far, it has always been kind of one of the pillars to growing in my career, I would say.
Yeah. There's like people who can take that kind of, I call it constructive criticism in a way. People who can take it, and I always say like, the ones that can handle it and use that to their benefit are the ones who really, flourish, because there's something about putting your ego aside to really listen to what other people have to say, especially people you respect, to just kind of make those tweaks and changes and, come out of that a better version of yourself. So that's really cool and really powerful. So what are your thoughts on, finding creative ways to cope with mental health? It's a tough question, but you already are creative. You already do this in a way. You think it's helpful?
I think in a way, as a creative, your mental health is a part of everything that you do, regardless. I mean, being creatives, we wear our hearts on our sleeves, regardless if it's for a client or for ourselves. So in a way, your identity is always being showcased. And I think it's just important to accept that and really focus on like what ways can you like perform to your fullest whenever you're creating in that manner, in my opinion. But there it is.
I would say for me, it has become a way to exercise like the question of what do you want out of this creative process when it comes to like the scope of mental health, right? And so a lot of times I always say that creativity, art, or just anything in the creative realm is essentially an opportunity for you to create that safe space for yourself. And that safe space means there's no judgment, there's no need to apologize. There's an immense sense of self-expression, self-forgiveness, and the ability to release whatever you're feeling at the moment. And also at the very core, just be who you are when you feel like you can't be anything else elsewhere. Because when it comes to creativity, essentially, like Christian says, we are wearing our heart on our sleeves and we are expressing ourselves to the fullest. So I think what mental health does in that space, it allows yourself to really dissect who you are, what are your boundaries, and also creating that safety net for yourself to take whatever you're feeling in the outside world and put it into your work, or just be able to give yourself a therapy session where you're just coloring or you're just painting or you're just, getting lost with your hands. That is a form of therapy in itself. So really it's what do you want to get out of your creative process and how can your mental health benefit from that?
Yeah. And I think it's also important to note too, that stuff doesn't happen overnight to get to the point to where you can see your work as that, for you, because, like I say it a lot and you guys say it a lot, healing isn't linear. You always have ups and downs. And, Christian, you personally experienced this where, one of the things we've talked about is just the idea of like artists, relying on mental illness per se, or your mental health in general, to be able to create this, work, this like quality work. If you're not depressed or you're not struggling with some type of mental health condition, your work isn't going to be as good as someone who is. So what do you guys think about that statement in general? Like, what do you think? Do you think that's true? Do you think it's not true?
I mean, I think when it comes to creating, I mean, if you look back into the times, I mean, you look at Edgar Allan Poe, and I think that's the one that stuck out the most to me. I mean, he wrote some of the most beautiful, like, literature that we can all just read, but it was just so dark. And obviously, it does feed a certain area of our mental health. But I think just, like, if you were to change that perspective of, like, like, grabbing that dark energy and kind of, instead of like expressing dark energy, you turned it into something that could become more of like a learning lesson for yourself, and then that can just like leak onto your work. I feel like it could be more uplifting. Depression is, to me, the emotion that all of us can relate to. Everyone, it's kind of like a magnet. It's the first thing that you feel, and so when and it's hard for us to see that, like, there could be like there could be one depression, but there could be multiple options to get out of it. So it's tough at first, but it is doable. Being able to like transform that energy into something positive, and that being able to speak through your art as well. It's just a matter of just practice, and giving yourself a break too.
Yeah.
It's always the toughest part. It's, when we were talking about like, your work and like how growing into it, it's just like you said, things don't happen overnight. So allow yourself to go through that journey to get there.
Yeah, absolutely.
When people do therapy, they immediately think of how it's just a one overnight type thing. Like you go to therapy and then all your problems are solved. But if you've actually done therapy, you're in it for the long haul. That like there are certain triggers, there are certain boundaries, there are certain things that you need to do to overcome all the compartmentalization that you've been doing very organically, because that's what our bodies and minds tend to do. Is like when we're in trauma or when we're in stress and we don't know how to cope with those things, our body compartmentalizes those emotions, puts them away so that way we're able to still function. The same thing with creativity is that it depends on your growth. If you want to be that tortured, depressing artist, which we have seen so many in our history, the Basquiat's, the Alexander McQueen's, and as Christian says, turn that energy into a positive form of light, that's something you need to cultivate. And that's something that you have the opportunity to do. People that want to live that narrative, that is a choice that they make. They make the choice to sit there and be like, my art is going to stem from a place of this darkness, and I'm just going to sit in that because that's all they know, and they don't have resources or people to teach them any differently, but you can go the route as Christian said, is that you can allow to take that energy and morph it into something lighter.
Yeah.
When I first started into art, my process was just, I didn't know what language that was. I was just creating to create. And the more that I matured, the more I grew into my craft, and the more I understood these different facets and the benefits I was gaining from them, not just in a social or like accolade way. It was more so of like a personal, emotional state of mind. That's when I began to understand that my art essentially is a form of therapy, and it allows me to express myself, but also release, like Christian said, positive light and form of vibrancy into the world that I did not have, you know? So it's really just what you want to be as an artist. And if you want to progress and grow mentally and have a balanced mental health, I think it's all depending on your preference of your art career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, going back to the idea of therapy, it's so interesting, because I think a lot of people, when you talk about therapy or going to therapy, people think, oh, you only go for like one time and you're done. It's just like a doctor's appointment, right? Like you just go for once and you're done. Or you go for like a couple of weeks or months. And for some people, that's all they need. But, there's people that have been in therapy for years. And, therapists, I can say this being one of them, you don't just wave a magic wand and your client is, fixed.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do too much as far as giving advice, because that's not something we're trained to do. We don't know, what our clients are going through every other hour of the week. We only see our client for 1 hour a week, and all the rest of the time, they could be living their lives doing something. We're not there to see that. So what we really do is we go in and we meet with people and we help them figure out what they want, what their goals are, how to achieve those goals on their own, and how to kind of come to their own answers and their own decisions just by asking the right questions. And also just like giving people the skills they need to be able to cope, like teaching people different coping skills, working with your clients to find out what's a good match for them, and how, they can use those coping skills regularly and reinforce that use to help improve their moods and their feelings overall. And art being an amazing way to cope with your mental health. Not only just to kind of have that time to practice mindfulness, when you're creating, you're really in the moment, you're really present, but also because it's a way to kind of non-verbally express yourself. Because, talking about your feelings is really hard to do sometimes face-to-face in conversation with someone, or even to just write those words out for people. Like, that's really challenging, because when you put it on paper or you say it, that's you kind of coming to terms with something that you might be trying to kind of keep under the rug, or, put all the way back in the back of your mind. So,
right.
Being able to do that through art is a safer way for a lot of people, because you're not, you know what it means, but other people might not interpret it the same way. And there's something that's really cool about that. And just really, inspiring to be able to like get it out there in a way where you don't feel like you're on a megaphone, like sharing all of your woes or whatever with the world. But also going back to the idea of like creating, I don't think, like Christian was saying, you don't have to rely on depression to create. Like, you can express all emotions. Like, you don't have to just say like, I'm sad. Happiness is also a feeling, joy, excitement. Like, those are all great feelings to feel. And we can also create, based on those emotions and use those as fuel and motivation. But, you mentioned too, like some of the highs and lows along the way. And I don't know if there's any standout ones that you can think of, like any specific points along your journey, maybe a low or a high that really shaped that for you. Is there anything that comes to mind that you can think of that you want to share?
Yeah. My lowest came right before I started like getting into design. Deanna and I worked way back in the day at some production company in Florida. That's where we met. So that's where we became homies. And at the time, I was a key grip in the whole production world. Basically a body in a way that, is just muscle, and like you help set up, the scenes and the shots and all the stuff, which I'm very grateful that I went through that whole stage of production just because I learned so much about composition and what's doable, what's not, what's realistic, what's not, what's a realistic budget, what's not a realistic budget. And but I remember that I was craving so much more because of the friendships I had around me. They were like doing their own thing and they were finding their identities, and I felt like I was not tapping into my identity at all.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the whole production side of things brought me to Orlando. And at the time, I mean, I remember like it was yesterday, Trump had just won. My mom had just moved back to Colombia. I was living by myself in Orlando, even though I had close friends in the same neighborhood. And I still wasn't feeling fulfilled whatsoever. And I decided to write a record with one of my really close friends, Matthew. And it was 4 songs about the 4 darkest times in my life. And I remember that needing an album cover. So I had already tried the vector illustrating and the hand drawing thing. And it was fun, but it wasn't for me. So I just kind of just bought some like analog stuff and just started trying to figure out how do I make this body of emotions into a cover. And it ended up being the Kanashi cover that I ended up coming with. But that itself was the closest I ever felt to having an identity. So in a way, I consider that my lowest point and my highest point.
Yeah.
Just how it resolved everything that I was looking for, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But it also shows an example that like in the darkest times also comes the biggest pivots towards positivity for you.
Yeah. All those L's.
Preach it, brother.
The L's really do become lessons in and those L's, some of those L's hit really hard. But if we're able to take them and come out of it, it's really cool. It's a really great experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say I would have a low to high experience when I first moved here to New York in October 2 years ago. I did not want to be here whatsoever. I thought I was going to always end up in Atlanta and just, live in a really nice loft and pay like little to no money because the rent at the time was so cheap in Atlanta. And I was just going to travel the world and do all this stuff. But then, as the universe has it, always wants to, teach you a bigger lesson. So moved to New York. And I remember the first year I felt into a really depressive state, only because I went from having footing in one specific area, which is like Florida, and then having my community there. And I thought that my trajectory for my career was going to take off in that area. But then I moved here and then I had no sense of footing of what I was going to do, if COVL even had the longevity to be here and upkeep in New York. I didn't have a community here. I barely knew people. And then I would say, given that year and learning and understanding and adapting and growing, by the time I met my manager and she agreed to manage me, was kind of like, oh, wait, I do have value. I do have potential here. It's not just me speaking on my soapbox. It's literally someone else is like, I see the power and potential in you, and I'm down to ride this out with you. And that's when it was like a little like light bulb went in my head where I felt, okay, so I am where I'm supposed to be. It just doesn't look as I imagined it to be. So I would say that's like my high-low experience.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think it's crazy how things turn out sometimes, like we have this idea in our minds of how we want things to be and how they should be. And sometimes those things aren't always the best things for us, and life works in mysterious ways. I don't know. I'm like iffy and I'm on the fence about the whole idea of manifestation and that kind of stuff, and like fate. But I'm very like scientifically like minded. I need like evidence and concrete proof, but it's funny because there's a lot of things happening that are, there's no evidence, but it's like, what the heck's going on here that I need to figure it out. But I guess, let's see here. So we talked a little bit about how your mindset and work has shifted over the years and over your course of your journey. now that you are at a point, do you feel that you're at a point where, you know, you're holding the reins right now, or do you still feel like at times you get a little bit of uneasiness or a little bit of out of control feeling where chaos is happening? And I mean, that's completely normal. It happens to me all the time. I feel like I'm in control at times of my schedule and everything and the work coming in. But at the same time, I also feel like there's days where it's chaos and I can't get my schedule straightened out and I don't know what I'm going to do next and I'm flailing around and I can't find motivation. So how's that like for you right now? Do you feel you have days like that, or do you feel like for the most part you're pretty much in control?
I think days like that are inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
We'll never have full control, especially when it comes to this side of the industry, just because it's either you have something that's due in 2 weeks, or for some reason those 2 weeks turn into 2 days overnight, and you wake up to a text and then the deliverable by the end of the day and all these things. So I've mentally prepared myself with coping mechanisms. I do know for a fact that I won't have control 100% of the time, but by knowing that I'm able to do certain things that can bring me to peace whenever these things become overwhelming. Just because like you just never know. It's such a hit or miss thing. There are 2 weeks that, you know, there are weeks that I have that are pretty chilled and like I know the lay of the land. And then there are other weeks that I'm walking behind a curtain and I'm just, you know, hitting whatever I hit along the way. But it's more of, you know, during those weeks, it's more of about how do I calm myself down whenever I have those walking behind the curtain days. And then how do I keep myself productive when I have those chill weeks, you know, or those chill days.
Yeah.
So in a way, I think I've got the reins on how to bring myself back down to earth.
Yeah.
But I definitely do not have the reins on the universe being the universe and doing its thing.
Yo, that's so relevant. Before all this started, I was what you would consider a workaholic, and I was always constantly going, and I measured unfortunately my value by how busy I was. And I think before all this happened, a lot of people did. A lot of people valued themselves on how busy they were and how much time they didn't have for real life. So before all this happened, that was me. I was like, I need to constantly go. I need to keep working. I have to keep working. Only because like I'm trying to achieve certain things, not only for myself, but for my family as well. You know, my bigger end goal is to be able to provide for my family. When this happened, it was almost as if someone took their finger and was like, reset. And made me realize that those moments of stillness and those moments of doing absolutely nothing, those moments of acknowledging when you need a break, and it's 1000% okay to take a break. There's those moments that I lacked so much in realizing or acknowledging prior to this is what I've been relearning now. That if I wake up in the morning and I don't have the energy to do absolutely nothing, including the talking to people, then that is okay. It's okay for me to not do anything. And it's okay for me to do something. I remember at the very beginning of this pandemic, everyone was like, you know, by the end of this, we need to be more productive, more this and more that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, no, that's not what you need to walk out of this with. What you need to walk out of this with is knowing your boundaries, knowing that balance between taking a break and working, finding healthy boundaries that keep you motivated in line when you need it. You know, those are things you need to walk away with, not like reading 10,000 books, you know, being a snatch snack by the summer with like 12 abs and like
that's my goal.
all these things like that, because that placed an unnecessary pressure on me. Like once I started seeing that, I was like, I need to do this, I need to do that. But in actuality, I needed to slow down and I needed to get reacquainted with myself and my needs.
Yeah. No, and I think I knew the answer to that before I even asked you the question, but I also am happy that you shared, because I think it's important that we just put it out there in the world, because especially with social media these days, you know, it is definitely a highlight reel, and both of you do a great job of also sharing and being very transparent. But I think it's, you know, it just goes to say that, you know, no matter how, you know, successful you are, or, you know, what is going on in your life, like at the end of the day, we all experience this. You know, we all have those days where things get out of control and we feel like we're just flailing, and we need to just set those boundaries and take a step back. And so my next question would be, what are, you know, the ways you cope? Like, what are your coping skills? What do you do to get yourself in equilibrium when you're feeling a little all over the place?
Definitely walking away from the computer. It's easy for us to just sit on it, just sit on the computer and like ram our heads against this wall. And especially creatively, it's also very easy that once you find this place where you're stuck, to find yourself either at Pinterest or Arena, and just dissecting all these realms. And sometimes the biggest inspiration or the biggest way to break through it is to not think about it at all. There's moments that I literally just put on music, go lay on the couch, sit with our dog Bernie, and just stare at the ceiling. And then just kind of just like see where that takes me. Because if I'm ramming my head against this roadblock, this doesn't mean that I'm gonna break through it cleanly. I mean, I would wanna always like deliver with a form of rationality that's up to 100%, not just because, oh, like this is just an easy way out. So that's one of the coping mechanisms that I have. Sometimes just writing down in a journal frustrations, or, you know, just doing little routines like that. Breathing exercises also help out too. Just because I feel like a lot of creative blocks come with a party of frustration and just self-doubt. So if I'm able to just cope with those and really have the grip on those, I do know that the creative block won't be as much of a setback. It's just more of like a math equation at that point.
Yeah, definitely.
I do a lot of dancing. And I think a lot of people on my Instagram have witnessed me dance a lot. And I started doing that because I live in my head. I think we all do, but I definitely rented out a space in my head where I live in. And so if I get stuck in that little compartment on my brain, especially when it comes to work or obtaining a certain level of quality of my work, I have to like shake it out. And so there's a lot of times, as people see me on the gram, I just dance. And I've also gotten really into making playlists. Like I just make a lot of these playlists. And those playlists stem from like either the mood that I'm waking up in the morning or what I want to listen to for the rest of the day to enhance my productivity and like be able to focus. So music surprisingly has become a major part of my day to day. I wake up with music, and sometimes I'm going to sleep with music. I'm dancing to it. I'm cooking to it. I'm creating with it. But it has allowed me to disconnect one part of my brain and connect to the other. So that way I'm not exhausting myself so much.
How do you, so if you cope at all by, you know, creating art, how do you set the boundary between creating art for self-care versus creating art for work? Is there any method to your madness with that?
There is. I mean, I think obviously creating art for work has some sort of like procedure, some steps that you have to go through, just because, you know, as creatives, we have to enhance the message and the voice of the client to reach whatever goal is that they're trying to reach. When it comes to doing work for myself, it's kind of like this, I consider it like a word vomit, like a stream of conscience. Like whatever's in my mind, I'm laying it down, and I don't care what anyone else thinks, because this is what I'm feeling right now, and I will do whatever I want to it. So it's kind of like this free for all of creativity, and that's the two worlds that I've built in my creative mind, and I will always keep them separated. just because it's my playground.
Yeah.
It's like my little home, like my sandbox. Like I get to build whatever, I get to build whatever castles I want there.
Yeah.
And no one can ever tell me what my castle should look like because that's not your sandbox. That's my sandbox.
I love that. But also that's like just a prime example of setting that boundary for yourself, you know? I think sometimes like people talk about like setting boundaries, it's like there's some people who don't know what that means per se, or like what a boundary necessarily looks like, and you know, it could literally be like saying no to people or clients, or it could just mean like not letting people tell you how to build your sandcastle, because that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I love the sandcastle analogy. I want to build sandcastles. I want to be on the beach.
What the hell?
Honestly, ever since this reset, I'm still learning that boundary, that fine line between what creating looks like for me and then what creating looks like for a client. I thought I had that handled, but like I said, I'm learning a lot of new things now and understanding that actually the way I was navigating through my workflow and process actually needs a lot of refinement and tweaking. So I think right now what has helped is that I'm just trying to implement a one lane kind of structure where I do research, I understand logistically what I'm doing, because that helps me kind of pipeline what I want to do creatively for myself, but also it allows me to strengthen those muscles. So when I do work with a client, that workflow looks better too. So I'm just relearning right now. I don't have like a clear definition of what that looks like, but I think that's where the fun part comes in. Yeah. Identifying those lines, where that creative process looks like for you, and then what it looks like for your client. Sometimes it looks the same, sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. I'll find that out. And when I do, I will let y'all know.
No, that's perfect.
And there was one more thing though. I completely forgot to mention. I think the biggest part that I learned on that was detachment. It's how do you, because you know how we spoke before, we wear our hearts on our sleeves. And I think one of the biggest problems that I had, and man, I had this big issue, is just I always felt whenever I got some client work, like I had to bring my identity over. And it wasn't that. It was just, how do you detach that? Because and that's the only way that you can actually truly understand what the client wants, but also like keep your heart and your creative feelings untouched as well. Because there were moments that I was sending mock-ups, and whenever they would send a feedback, it was like if someone slapped me. And I was like, how dare they? Like, how could they?
Well, and, I think that's what helps. Like prior to this, like every time I did get locked in for a certain project, we would always ask the client, are you hiring me because of the skill set, or are you hiring me because of my style? And that way, moving forward, I knew what the client wanted, but the creative process in that, has now changed. So, but I do agree, like some kind of detachment from that project does help in the long run, because we can get a little sensitive about our shit, okay?
Yep.
All right, so let's do some Q&A questions. I'm going to put some up on the screen here, and I'll ask them. Okay, so how do you cope when you have too many creative ideas and no motivation?
Too many creative ideas, no motivation. I usually, whenever I'm feeling that way, I grab a blank piece of paper and I just start drawing whatever's in my mind. And I do know that by doing that, it's like decompressing my mind and letting things go out. So that way it makes room to actually feel motivated. Yeah, I always feel like you just gotta be hands-on and just get things out in order for new things to come in, in your mind to make room. So that's the way that I usually tackle like a situation like that. Is just start seeing where my creativity leads me to, and then assess it whenever I get there. I'm not gonna feel like I have full reins on creativity just because that's just not the reality.
Yeah.
We can have reins on skill sets, but not really on creativity. So I just usually just let it be. And once I get there, I'll probably have an aha moment and then start executing the way that I want it to look like.
Yeah. Yeah, same. I write mine. I just write it down. Have a whiteboard. And if I have an idea that comes into mind and I'm just not in that state of mind currently, I just write it down. And if I have a description for it, I'll add that too, just so I can revisit it when it makes sense again. But when I'm in those moods, I'm in that mood and I'm just gonna leave it be. Yeah, leave it be, because I feel like it's a rabbit hole if you try to force it at that point.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Let's see. Next question. How do you turn the short-term thrill you get from creating something into long-term joy?
Oh,
that's a tough question.
Long-term joy.
That's a hard question.
I just think the journey of a creative. I consider creatives masochists. I consider myself a masochist.
Yes.
Just because you always have this expectation in your mind, and there's a video by Ira Glass where it's called The Gap, and it's basically talks about how like execution and taste coexist, and how the more you execute, the shorter the gap gets, but the more you execute, the more you develop your taste. So the gap never closes. So in a way, you're just never satisfied. That's what it means. So kind of like how it like implements to me, I find myself always like finishing something dope and being like, this is sick. And in 3 hours being like, like, I just can't wait to do the next one. So I think to me, that's the joy of it. That you're always going to be growing. You're always going to be creating something better. It kind of is painful that you're just never going to find that like being pleased with it. You're always always nitpicking at it, but the joy of it is the growth, is the journey, is the failures, is the, it's falling down, getting back up. It's the masochist relationship you have with it, I guess.
Wow. Yo, I couldn't even have said it any better. That pain that brings joy in the creative process, and like that never ending search for what people like to say perfection just doesn't exist in many artists' vocabulary. Like if an artist is going to sit here and say, I'm achieving perfection every time, okay, good luck. Because like Christian said, we're always evolving, we're always learning. And whatever version of that is, when we complete a project, that's one version of ourselves. 5 months from then, we're going to be a different version of ourselves. So that piece is going to look completely different. So
it's growth, baby.
I couldn't have said it any better.
Yeah, no, really.
It's a never-ending journey. But it feels good though. It feels good to know that we may not reach that point of perfection or contentment, but that growth in between that I can actually see in my work from month to month, year to year, that just makes it all worth it.
Yeah. Being able to look back and say, like, this is where I started, this is where I am now, and that's really cool. That's really amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. All right, let's see what the next question is. How do you stay motivated to continue creating even during times like these?
It's a craving. I think every artist, every creative just has this urge, like this itch of doing something. Like standing still always feels weird. So if I'm not on the computer designing something or working on a project, I'm hand chain stitching, which is very painful on the hands. But I'm either doing that, or if I'm not doing that, I'm like drawing something. So in a way, it's not much of me trying to stay motivated, but it's just kind of like scratching that itch for me. But if I am feeling unmotivated, I usually just let it be. Let myself feel that unmotivation, just because maybe that's my mind telling me to take a breather. How you talked about before, Deanna, it's like, our brains are always on the go. Like, think about it. It's like a computer.
Mhm.
It goes to sleep for 8 hours or even less sometimes. And then from there, it goes back to 100 for almost like 18 hours a day. Like,
Yeah, and even when you're asleep,
if
it's
I'm
still
on,
working because it's storing all the memories from the day. Nuts.
exactly,
No sleep.
exactly. So if I'm unmotivated, I'm gonna let it be unmotivated.
Yeah.
And if I don't want to touch anything, I won't touch anything. Because like your mind's a muscle. So if the muscle's exhausted, you're not gonna overwork that muscle.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let the
No, it's
muscle heal.
completely true. That's completely true. And I feel like what's helped as well is like switching out my routine. If I'm not going to create or I'm not feeling motivated in that aspect, I'll read because I feel like some kind of nourishment to my mind is still progress nonetheless. And I feel like when we're not doing anything, we feel like that's not progress. But in the
Yeah.
all entirety of it all, it is progress. It's allowing our time to like rest down, take a chill pill, get reasserted, get realigned, and then be prepared for the next day. So for me, it's been like switching up my routine, reading, exercising has helped a lot because it allows me to get out of my mind and into my body. To check in with how I feel with my body, I think is really essential because now that it's just me by myself, I mean, I have my dog now, but now that it's just me, I have to really be aligned, not only mentally, not only emotionally, but I also need to be aligned physically and making sure that I'm still going, I'm still active, so that way other parts of me can function at 100%.
Yeah. No. When you're feeling burnt out, like, are there any specific symptoms or signs that you guys personally notice that are good indicators to just kind of hone in on those coping skills?
Physically, my eyes start burning.
Wow.
Specifically my left eye. Usually my left eye stresses out more than my right eye. So when I'm feeling really, really burnt out, like I've hit like this wall, it's usually whenever I start feeling that pain, and I get a slight headache, just because it feels like I'm just spinning in mud. But creatively, the way I know I'm feeling burnt out is when I get easily frustrated by either revisions or just conversations with either clients or friends, or like I become very sensitive, and just feel like I want to be left alone. So whenever those things start happening, that's when I kind of just not turn off my computer, but just like look away, either go on a walk with my girlfriend Kelly and Bernie, or go out to the backyard, take the sun in, look out the window, look at a squirrel, whatever it is. Just something to like get my mind off of this whole like creative like role that I'm feeling at the moment. So yeah.
When I experience burnouts, I get so grumpy. It's like that feeling of being hangry, like you're hungry and angry at the same time, but it just never goes away. That's how I feel when I'm like burnt out. And usually I take it out on myself. So like if I do something, like if I drop a glass or something, like I get really pissed off at that. So once I've defined that line, I just turn off. I turn off my computer. I turned off anything that like triggers that. Because I feel like a lot of times when I'm feeling burnt out, I'm on social media. I'm like looking at everybody. I'm like, why this? Why that? And I just get so grumpy at nothing. So I just disconnect completely. When I do that, just allow my mind just to kind of reset, get my emotions in line and figure out what triggered that. Why do I feel burnt out? What are things that I'm doing that I can fix? And then once I get that under control again, then I pop back up into the service. But yeah, hangry is a real thing when I'm burnt out.
It's really wild how like the whole like mind body connection is so powerful. Like when we're in a bad mental space, right? Our thoughts are negative, and then you notice the reaction in our body. Sometimes like your eyes burning or your heart racing faster or sweating. And then you kind of have to go back into your mind and change the way you're thinking about it to make your body feel better. And it's like really all connected, it's nuts how it's just like this cycle of, practicing deep breathing to actually calm your body down, then to get your thoughts better. So it's just like nuts how, so we're going to change the topic a little bit off mental health. Colin has a question for you, Christian. He needs some mustache tips. I must ask you a question. Okay, that's my dad joke for
So okay, so this is a funny question because I remember in high school seeing all these people with these epic beards, epic stashes, and I had literally 3 strands of hair like over my upper lip, and I was like, one, what did you guys eat? Two, what are you drinking? Should I be drinking more beer in order to like get my beard out or what? But it just, I don't know, it just started happening, and now I have this decent mustache. But if there's a tip, is just take care of it. Just trim it, oil it up, wash it. Yeah.
Colin sitting next to me, so I'm pointing at him because he has some oil from our friend Umar, so he has to use it. All right.
Tell him I need to say. Tell me I need to see a mustache picture for evidence.
All right, we have one for Deanna now. Deanna, how do you get your hair so long and luscious? These are real questions. I'm not making this stuff up. People need to know about your facial and body hair and his hair topic today. So share the tips, people.
I would have to say that this no heat has helped a lot. For the past like over 2 months now, I haven't applied any heat to my hair. And I've been keeping the routine pretty minimal. Like I'll wash my hair, I'll put in a serum, and then I'll just braid it. Some days, I know it sounds weird, but I'll take my hair like in the front and then I'll brush it backwards. Those are things that I feel like have helped my hair growth. That's hilarious. Also, thank you.
We're going to bring it back to some more questions about your work. This question's good. What things, events, or thoughts help you find your voice in your art?
I think just life experiences, to me, just because life itself is just such a roller coaster and it's such an unpredictable event that honestly, that's the only event I can like handle. And just relationships with people. I think like the connection with people has been like super massive inspiration for me lately. It's just getting to know them, their story. Oh no. But yeah.
What was the question again? Sorry.
What things, events, or thoughts help you find your voice?
This connection lost.
You're good.
No, you're still here, Christian.
Yeah, you're good, Christian.
He probably doesn't think he's good. You see it, Christian? Oh, no, he dropped.
Let me just... We'll wait till we bring him back and see if he comes back.
Oh, I'm back.
He back.
It freaked me out. I was like, connection lost.
Yo, I don't know what's going on.
I don't know where I was, but I was...
Do you have Optimum too?
What happened?
What?
Do you have Optimum too as a provider? If so, I'm going to write
I have Spectrum, even worse.
Oh, yeah. Brothers.
But I guess what I was saying is just connection with people and just their stories. Getting to know them is a massive inspiration into putting myself in different perspectives to create an art that finds itself in the middle of a conversation and never tilts the scale favoring one side or the other. Just because I feel if you create something that's in the middle, it'll attract people to have a conversation about things that they don't want to talk about. So yeah.
Cool.
That's mine.
Yeah, I would say my art stems a lot from my childhood, my upbringing. It speaks a lot of that. And I am fascinated with the ocean, specifically like sea animals. I love the octopus. I think that's pretty evident. But I love the underwater simply because of like the shading and the lighting that occurs down there when the sun hits. And the animals are like floating around. So I found a lot of like therapy through that, and also just like I said, speaking back to my childhood experiences through color theory and shading and lighting.
Cool. That's cool. I have to think about that for myself. I don't create art, so mine is just really basketball inspires me a lot in sport. All right, question from Ariana. What is Arena? I see a lot of people on it now, and do you use it often in your creative process? Am I saying that right? Aaron.A.
Yeah. I feel, from what I've gathered, and I've asked this question multiple times, what Arena is, and I don't think anyone has bothered to answer my question, so I'm gonna go based off of my assumption. Arena is more of like a dumpster with people just like creative people are just throwing in either inspirations or some of their work to inspire others. I have used it a little bit. I've definitely strayed away from Pinterest just because it's just a nightmare itself. But I do find more things in Arena that are very experimental and just weird that kind of like do trigger like either an idea or motivate me to take a route that I haven't explored before when it comes to like work or design.
I haven't heard about Arena either. I'll look into it. Thanks for putting me on.
Yeah.
I'll send you the link. Pretty cool.
All right, next question. Sorry, we're gonna get through these questions and then we'll do rapid fire and we'll be done. I don't want to keep you on all night. How do you consistently find fresh new clients to work with?
So I will say this in the humblest way possible. I usually just started creating stuff I started treating my Instagram as a portfolio. So I started creating work that I wanted to work in. I remember at first I was trying to figure out, how do you approach that? Like, how do you kind of feel like known? How do people like notice this and that? But I usually people are on their social medias sometimes. It's always worked better for me gaining clients either through Instagram or Twitter. For some reason, there's very few that I've had to reach out through email, but it's always been through the social media handles that everyone's usually at. It's just such a fast-paced society right now, especially online, that I feel they always either end up reaching out through that or an email. So, but fresh new clients, I usually just create to see if I can get them. I don't know. I don't ever want to like go out and like be like fiending at them. So I usually just create them and then like interact with them. Just because I feel like conversations with people, they're humans too. And I feel like sometimes they crave that. They crave, this is funny, or like, hope you're having a good day. Instead of like, your brand's so tight, man. Let me do a t-shirt design for you. So, yeah.
To piggyback what Christian said, it basically has been just building anything that I wanted to see. And a good friend of mine told me that a long time ago. You build it and they'll come. So everything is an exact representation of who I am as an artist, what you see on my portfolio and on my Instagram. So I think naturally and organically, the brands that align well with that, they have gravitated towards me. And also to add on to that has been relationships. A lot of the opportunities that I've gotten has been, I have good relationships with those people that have the ability to put people on and share their platform. So I think has been a mix of both, like building what I want to see more in the world and also upholding those relationships with people.
Yep.
All right. One more question here. Maybe two more. This question, it kind of covered it already, but how do you find inspiration in this field of recycled ideas?
In a way, we're all melting pots, right? We're not recreating the wheel. We're not making we're not recreating a car. We're just adding our own specs to it. So we're pimping it out in our own way. And I think that was that was the biggest lesson that I think I've learned as a creative, is just knowing that I'm not changing it's not like I'm doing things to change the world. I'm doing things for the world to know what my voice sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
So finding inspiration in such a recycled world, I mean, it's just the way it's been, and it's the way that it's always been. It's just figuring out how do you add your own identity to it. Because that hasn't been done yet.
Yeah.
You know, you're a one out of one person. You know, there's only one mind like yours. So when you add your own spin and your own taste to it, that's going to be the first time that the creative world has seen a piece like that.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. And I think finding your own identity is the first step, you know? Like, there's a lot of people out there who still are trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Hard.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, I would say that I've been teaching myself how to see the beauty in things. Every time I take the dog for a walk or anything, like anytime I'm just like walking around in the city, I'm purposely training my eye on how to see the beauty in everything that I look at. Because oftentimes our first impression of something is our first impression, and then we move on and we never give it a chance to actually allow that thing to speak to us in the way that it was purposed to be. So I think that's helped me a lot when it comes to like research and finding inspiration. I think that's why I do like a lot of the doodle bombs. Like I'll look at everyday ordinary things and allowing myself to take what I see and mesh those two worlds together and provide an art piece. So I think it's just training my eye to see the beauty in that's been helpful for inspiration purposes.
Hell yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you guys both for being on. We're going to finish it off with a rapid fire round, and it's going to be fun. I promise. So,
I'm nervous.
The first question, what's one brand that you always wanted to work with?
Nike. And yeah, Nike for me.
Hey Nike, if you're watching this.
You know, just hit me up.
Just hit me up in my life. Damn. This question's so funny to me because I never expected to be. I never planned for where I am in my life right now, and I never thought I would get to join forces with the brands that I have already done. Like I never saw that ever coming. So every time I'm asked this question, I'm like, damn, I don't know, because I've never set a goal, or I've never set the bar for that dream collaboration with that dream brand. I feel like all the brands that I've worked with so far have in some shape or form taken a part of my life, and that's what's allowed me to do these opportunities, because it's so organic and it's something that we both are so beneficial from. Like it's something that I mess with, it's something that I believe in, and then also they believe in me, so it's like a good synergy going on. So it's hard to say my dream brand without being biased and saying I would love to collaborate with my own brand made by COVL and be able to do the things that I have planned with that brand. So I think at some point it's going to be that made by COVL is my dream brand to collaborate.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, next question. What's the last thing that you liked on social media?
Last thing that I liked.
Last thing that I liked, as in like double tap liked, or like I was looking on my phone going like, wow, this is cool.
Either or, whatever first thing that comes to
mind.
I
think the last thing I liked was the latest Nike SBs with Ben & Jerry's, but that's because I like ice cream.
Those chunky dunkies.
And like I worked at Ben & Jerry's for like a year, so I'm very
nice.
But that was the last thing I think I liked.
I'm sitting right now, so I'm like, what was the last thing? Okay, there's this account called The Council with the K, and it's this girl that she plays the role of she plays 4 different roles, and it's a female oriented thing, so it's like her heart, the brain, the lady part, and then the logic, and then they all sit in a circle and they all talk about whatever they're going on at the time. But it's like so relatable, and I've been laughing and crying at this account like the past week because I'm like, why can I relate? So yeah, the council would be the last thing that I liked.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
Oh, biggest pet peeve.
Being asked what your pet peeve is.
Let me think.
I can go first. I got it.
You go first.
Yeah. My biggest pet peeve is when people lack proactivity.
I can see that one. I think I'm gonna piggy off back that one before I stress myself out thinking about my pet peeves. So I'm gonna say that one as well.
Okay.
Take the easy way out.
It's a huge thing. I think it was because I was raised on that. You know, my brother always instilled proactivity in me, doing something before even someone needs to even ask you of that. That little principle has played such a huge part in my work ethic, being ahead 5 steps, 10 steps, because no one's going to ask for me to do that. I already done it. And I think when it comes to business, it's really helpful because you're taking reins of something that most people need the green light on. And I just can't do with that. I just can't.
Okay. This one's just for Christian. If you could skate with any pro for a day, who would you choose?
Oh, man. I already skated with my favorite pro, man. Shout out to Johan Stuckey. Skates for the weekend. Or weekend, not the weekend. But I love the weekend's record. Skates for a weekend. Yeah, he's I've been blessed to get to know him through my friend Billy. Super sweet dude, and I think that like fulfilled my dream of skating with a pro, to be honest.
Cool. Mine would probably be Shane O'Neill. Not that I skate. I would just follow him around all day. Deanna, this is for you. Since your prior venture in life, one of your prior ventures, you were a fashion blogger, am I right? Am I correct in saying that? What is your favorite and your most hated fashion trend of all time?
Oh God. All right, I know a lot of girls are gonna probably like slay me for this, but I did not like the Chinese slipper trend. Remember when the Chinese slipper came out? And it was like this netted front with like all the like things on top. And it came like in almost every color. Because I was gonna say the wedge sneaker, but I am unfortunately a victim to it. I did own a pair of wedge sneakers, so I'll probably get dragged for that too. But I think the worst trend was the Chinese slipper, and then Chinese laundry, I think it was called. And then the best, I'm a cozy gal at heart, so anything oversized, like a mom jean, I think looks great on all types of body shapes, and it gives you the cozy, it gives you the style. Put in a crop top with the hoodie. It doesn't matter. Whatever you do with the mom jean, it's gold in my book.
Ashley says she had all the colors of the Chinese slipper.
Yeah, she had the entire color palette.
Well, I mean, I remember growing up and seeing all the girls have all like the entire colorway, and I was like, why? You did one mistake once and then you do it again and again. I couldn't get into the Chinese slipper. I don't know why.
All right. Well, that is all I have for you guys as far as questions go. And I just want to say thank you both so much for taking the time to sit with me and talk about all of your mental health ventures in life, your ups and downs, your work, everything you're doing. I'm proud of both of you, and we'll always be here cheerleading for you guys because you're killing it, and I'm just here to...
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for your time, and thank you to everybody that's tuned in. Much love to y'all.
But yes, you guys stay on the Skype call. We'll finish offline, but I'm going to end the live now. But before we end the live, if anyone has, or anyone wants to... I'm lagging in the volume, sorry. If you guys want to leave your social handles or just tell people where they can find you or how they can get in contact with you, if anyone's tuning in that wants to.
Yeah. Just badboypoppy.com.
I'll talk to you after.
Or his social handle, badboypoppy.
The brand is strong.
The brand is strong with this one.
For me, it's COVL.co, and then for Instagram, it's COVL, COVL.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
See you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Later, y'all. Have a good one.